reality. Today, we're going to have a conversation about reality and particularly aligning our relationships with reality. Now, in order to do that, we're going to have to lay a foundation down of two things that are necessary for real relationships, that are grounded in the way the world actually is. Two cornerstones that are crucial. And they are trust and truth. Trust and truth. Now, we're going to do it by continuing our series through the Ten Commandments. And today, we're going to look at those of the Ten Commandments that are probably the easiest to remember that they're part of the Ten Commandments. I mean, we joked at the beginning that who could remember the Ten Commandments? These are two that come to mind. They're the ones where you go, well, there's something about not lying, and there's something about not killing people. Pretty sure those are the ones. And so they come to mind quickly. And they come to mind, not kill people, but steal from people. You shouldn't steal from people. We killed people last week. We didn't kill people last week, actually. You know what I mean. So there's one about stealing and there's one about lying. And so we remember these. And these are foundational, right? These are the things we impress upon our kids. We say to them, we don't take stuff that's not ours, and we tell the truth. These are just like basic things. And so because of that, we can fool ourselves into thinking that maybe we're doing better at them than we think. But at the heart of these are deep principles, because the work we're doing in this series with the Ten Commandments is that we're taking these Ten Commandments and instead of leaving them on cold stone, where they're a list of rules that we can check, I did those things, I'm good, a list of rules that we can find loopholes for, where we can technically follow the rule, but actually just totally break the rule. Instead of that, we're going to move them to the heart, and we're going to discover the deeper principle that is at first much more demanding, but then much more life-giving. Because when we understand these principles and we start to live by them, they give us a worldview, a way of looking at the world that is in line with reality. Now, we're doing this by reading the Ten Commandments through the teaching of Jesus in the sermon that he gave based on the Ten Commandments. It's in the New Testament. It's a sermon called the Sermon on the Mount. And when we see how Jesus moved these from cold stone to our heart, we're going to see that they're a lot more demanding, but they are a lot more powerful and life-giving, and will make you into something more amazing than you could ever imagine. And so today, we're looking at these two commandments. You shall not steal. And you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And these are all about honoring the others with integrity and truth. And so these are actually about relationships. You may remember that we said the first three of the Ten Commandments are all about our relationship with God. They're about making God the only God in your life and making God really big in your life. Nothing small about God in your life. And make sure that you learn how to rest in God. These kinds of ideas are at the heart of the Ten Commandments. So that's the foundation. And then we build on that the next seven, and the next seven are about how we treat each other, how we interact with one another. And at the heart of that is the Christian assumption, the Christian belief that every person is created in the image of God. Every person matters to God and therefore has worth and therefore has dignity. And these next seven commandments is how to honor the worth and dignity of people. And one of the big things we've been saying throughout this entire series is simply this, that you cannot degrade the worth and the dignity of another person without degrading your own dignity. You cannot make another person small without making yourself small. You cannot break these commands relationally towards people without violating the same command against your own humility, your own humanity. And so what you're going to see today is that when we steal in all the different applications from a principle perspective, we rob deeply from ourselves. And we're all going to see that when you become a person who is fundamentally dishonest, even though you might technically tell the truth, you have to start by being dishonest with yourself. And so you're going to see that this is central to humanity, and this is bedrock to our relationships. Incredibly powerful. So let's go ahead and take a look at these two commands one at a time and show the interrelationship with each other. So the first one is respecting what belongs to others, or a better way of saying this, respecting what has been entrusted to others. So there it is. You shall not steal. Now many of us, again, we'll get to the point where we'll say to ourselves, well, I got this one. I don't take stuff that's not mine. If my name's not on the deed, if I don't have any right to it, I just don't even mess with it. But when we take a deeper look at different ways we can steal, we start understanding that this is a lot more demanding than we imagine. So certainly you can steal a possession that God has entrusted to another person. You can take something that from their yard or from their life, or you could do something like use the law. So you sign a contract, but then you find a loophole in the contract, and you see what you can get away with to get as much. Well, there's the rule, and therefore I'm going to get around it. I'm going to get the thing they don't want me to get, but I didn't technically break any rules. I didn't technically steal it because, it's legal. We live in a world that right now we are drowning in legal. And over the years, many people have come to me when they're at a point where they're trying to decide whether or not they want to get involved in some kind of legal case or something. They just want to know what's the right thing to do. And so they'll come to me, and very often, before I say that, let me say this before I say the thing I'm going to say. I have rarely seen anybody get legal and get happy. Legal is what we are left with when relationships break down. The contract, the law, the courts, and it is cold, it is dispassionate, it is dehumanizing. And so the Bible is very clear. If you can avoid it, okay? But there are times when injustice has been done, something needs to be done. And so when I'm talking to the person, I'll try to listen deeply, and I'll say, okay, you said this, you did this. And I said, just in your heart, did you do anything wrong? And you will be amazed how many people will shrug and say, well, it wasn't illegal. And I say, that's not what I asked. I asked at the core level, if someone did that to you, would you feel like they had done something wrong to you? And when we get to that kind of level, we realize that stealing gets a little bit more dicey. You can steal credit from a person. You can steal, some idea, some thought. When it should be about them, somehow or another, you make it about you. You can steal attention. You can steal well-being and happiness from a person. You say, how do you do that? Well, when you hurt someone, when you degrade someone, when they should be having happiness and peace, particularly if you're in a relationship that should be a benefit from them, and you've become kind of a burden or even a curse to them, you are taking from them the advantages of being in that relationship. You can take from people in all kinds of ways. You can take from people in a conversation. You can steal from them. Let me do something. This is going to be really important for some of you. I want to illustrate how a conversation is supposed to work. So this is one person, and this is another person. In a healthy, mutually beneficial conversation, the one person talks, and the other person listens. And then this person stops talking, and then this person starts to listen, okay? There are some relationships where this person starts to talk. When you're in a conversation and it's someone else's turn to talk, and you should be curious about what's important to them and what they have to say and what they think, and you just keep talking, you are stealing from them their identity and their voice and their dignity to be heard. And so when you start understanding this thing of stealing is all about being a safe person, because when you're a person who has a stealing mentality, you go into every relationship as a transaction that you are trying to win. You are trying to get what you want and win what you want. You are not a safe person. You are a taker. And so when you go into relationships like that, the heart of this thing becomes just incredibly unhealthy. And you may say, well, I technically didn't do anything illegal, and I technically didn't break any rules, and I technically didn't take anything that I didn't have a right to. And then all of a sudden you convince yourself that you are not a person you're a person who's safe, but you're actually a taker rather than a giver. Now, the other way that we can do this is that we can be the other person who is all giver. That is to say, we can be the person who says, you know what, whatever you think is fine. I don't need to be heard. I don't need to listen. Just take from me, and you do everything for everybody, and just going and going and going and going all the time. You see, relationships are supposed to be mutually beneficial, give and take, listen and talk. It's supposed to be about two people who are on a journey together that both benefit from. It's supposed to be win-win. When you become the kind of person who only gives, it looks all noble, and you think you're a wonderful, heroic person, but the truth is you know that it's degrading yourself. You don't have real relationships, you have transaction. It's funny, many times people are in this condition, they get their chip on their shoulder about it. They say, you know what, I do everything, no one ever helps me. And then someone says, well, let me help you. No, I don't need any help. Well, I guess you could help with that. No, you're doing it wrong. And then they take it back. And so it's this need to be needed. And so we think that we're helping, but the truth is we're actually stealing from a person when we don't let them help you. Because here's the deal. When you're in a mutual giving relationship, and one person is giving to the other person, and the other person is giving back in proper proportion, it is a delight and a joy. Because Jesus said this, it is better to give than receive. But if you're that big hero that you never let anybody help you, and no one ever helps you, you are robbing them of the joy of being in the giving position. It is a powerful position to be in the giving position. It is a wonderful Christ-like position. And so to be in a humble relationship where you neither are the person who's all taking or all giving, but instead you figure out those emotionally intelligent relationships where it's about giving and receiving and mutual benefit, then you recognize that no one's stealing from anyone else, that it's about a giving relationship. Now, at the heart of this question about a stealing perspective, a stealing heart, understanding the principle of not stealing is why we steal. We steal for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's just good old-fashioned greed, I want, but sometimes it's about power and control. I'm going to beat you. And I'm going to control you, and I want to win. I must have. It's about some kind of weird dominance. Sometimes it's insecurity, that I'm going to win in the conversation thing. I'm going to take everything to me, the attention, the credit, the whatever it is, because I want to be seen. I need to be seen because I'm concerned that I'll be overlooked or I'll be forgotten, I'll be left behind, I'm not enough. And so we take in those relationships. Sometimes the fear is because in this life we've suffered some lack. Maybe we grew up and we just didn't have what other people have, and that really bothers us. And so we're just going to get more and more and more and more, so we'll never feel like that again, not understanding that we have embraced a new kind of poverty of selfishness and smallness. And so when we start understanding why we steal, we start understanding, holy cow, this is a bigger issue, because I may not, again, legally or technically take anything from anybody, but I may be robbing those who I'm supposed to be generous. We very often can rob people by all that we own. Now, it's not wrong to have stuff. It's not wrong to enjoy stuff. But when that drives us or gives us our sense of self or gives us our sense of security, it actually is just a form of the spirit of stealing. Now, what's the cure? Now, the cure is a very subtle thing that Jesus talks about in the New Testament. And it comes back to this thing he says in the Sermon on the Mount. This is part of the Lord's Prayer, where we say, give us this day our daily bread. So this is part of the Lord's Prayer. And the Lord's Prayer is, the disciples said, hey, how do we pray? He said, well, this is how you pray. When you talk to God, he's your father, whole new relationship. And talk about his kingdom and forgiveness, and you should forgive and be forgiven. He said, but here's the deal. Whatever you need, day in, day out, your source for what you need is God. He is, we just got done singing 3 songs about it, the good shepherd. And he does these wonderful things. He keeps me from problems. He pulls me out of holes when I get wandering. He comes and finds me. He leads me to green pastures where there's plenty and water that I need for my thirst. He leads me through really scary, deep, valleys of shadows of death. That sounds horrible, but he leads me through those things. When I believe he is the good shepherd, it changes my perspective. Now, what is at the heart of this is this concept called stewardship. Now, stewardship is distinct from this thing called ownership. Ownership is this thing where we say, I have stuff. I own stuff. I've worked, I've inherited, I've got it, and whoever has the most stuff, owns the most stuff, they are the most powerful, most important, most whatever. And that is the world's economy. The Bible is stunningly clear about this. The only person who owns anything is God. The earth is the Lord and all that it contains. Everything belongs to God. Now, God will entrust things to us as stewards. We are stewards of the things that God owns. And when we have the position of ownership, well, then we live differently. We say, well, I better take care of this stuff. I better get more. I better protect it. I better insure it. I better protect it from other people like you and you. And I got to compare. I don't have as big a pile as him. I should get a bigger pile, and then I'd be bigger. And then we start thinking of all the things. We fool ourselves into thinking that all we have is because we are the best, most noble, most good, most intelligent, when we might have just been the most lucky. And we work hard. I'm not putting down hard work or any of those kinds of things, because when we work hard, God will entrust you with more, but not for your ownership. But when you're a steward, you say, okay, God, you've entrusted me with things, and I want to take care of them. I want to honor them. I want to use them for your purposes. And when I understand that you have given me these things, the pressure is off. Because as an owner, if I don't have enough, I got to get more. But as a steward, if I don't have enough, I say, I need some bread, daily bread. As a steward, you know what? I need a provision. I need a healing. I need some hope. I need some encouragement. And so I don't have to enter into this thing of clutching and grabbing and manipulating to steal what I think I need. I trust that God is going to give me everything I need. Some of you say, you don't understand. I asked God for something yesterday he didn't give me. Well, here's the deal. God doesn't give you all your wants. He gives you your needs. And that's a good thing, because you don't really know what you want. You think you know what you want, but if you got what you want, you'd find out that's not really what I want. You don't even really know what you need, but you know who does? The Good Shepherd. And he will lead you to that place. And if you will live with that perspective, it frees you from this desire to have and to clutch and to grab, whether it be stuff or attention or credit or just everybody seeing me. It frees you from this stealing mentality. It frees you in the deepest level. All right, let's look at the second one and notice the interrelationship between the two. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Now, I want to start by pointing out what this does not say, because some of you say, well, that just pretty much means you don't lie. This commandment does not say do not lie. Now, there are other commandments that say don't lie, so I'm not endorsing lying, okay? But neither does this command say always tell the truth, because there are people who always tell the truth, and that's actually not helpful either. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. What this actually says is, do not create a narrative that misrepresents reality about a situation, about yourself, about another person. And there's two extremes where this is just not helpful. One is the person who says, okay, I'm going to find a way to technically not lie, but I'm going to create a narrative that completely misrepresents. Just everybody sees this on social media, and we all know what's going on. We're frustrated. We show a little clip, a comment out of context, something that happened, some narrative where someone is just painting a word and using inflection in certain words and leaving out key details, and they are technically not lying. Fact check, 100% true, but it completely misrepresents reality. And when you're in a relationship with that kind of person, whether it be business or politics or marriage or family or friendships, you are not in a safe relationship, because what this is manipulation. And manipulation is toxic to the relationship. Using words, using truth, using facts, quoting the Bible in such a way that you are trying to manipulate and hurt people. That's bearing false witness. That's saying something is true in line with reality that is not. You see, this thing of reality is crucial, because here's the thing about reality. When you don't live in reality, that is called insanity. People who believe in things that are not real, we say, we're just going to sit down over here until you don't believe in the Easter Bunny. I mean, we're just going to we're going to catch our breath. We just understand these people can't function. In order to align with reality, you have to have a deep commitment to truth, grounded in the nature and character of God. And at the heart of this desire for truth is a character quality called honesty. That I want to use simple words to portray things as they actually are. I want to use words to clarify that you would see things, that I would see things, that we would see things together, listening and talking, that are true, as opposed to people who will use many words. The Bible says where there are many words, sin is not absent. Where there's many words in order to actually confuse, to obfuscate, to manipulate, to twist, to turn, because ultimately it's related to this thing of stealing, because I want to manipulate the narrative so I can take what I want. I can win the fight. I can get the attention. I can get the stuff. You will come to my way of seeing it. And when you have this perspective and you're entering into relationships that are all toxic, well, then you're just not in safe relationships. And so there are people who can technically tell the truth, but they live in a lie. On the other side, there's the person who will just always tell the truth. The person who says, well, this command tells me I've got to be honest all the time. So anybody who asks me a question, I'm obligated to tell them the truth. And we think that that's somehow noble or something like that. So someone comes and says, hey, do my clothes make me look overweight? And you say, well, it's really not the clothes. Don't blame the clothes, you know. That would be honest maybe, but cruel. And these are the person, you know, they just come to church. What happened? How was your week? Well, I had surgery. Here's the scar. And I mean, they're just doing all the things, sharing too much information. Several years ago, there was a movement among the evangelical church, and everybody was talking about being real. They were talking about being transparent. And the whole idea is you're supposed to tell anybody how you're actually doing in real time. You're supposed to just blurt it out to the whole world, and authenticity and all those kinds of things like that. And as I was watching this go on, it seemed to me that a lot of people were getting hurt because some of these takers were taking this information and they were manipulating it. They would post it, they would guilt people, they would shame people, they would use it against it. They would dismiss the other important things people have to say because they would remind them they had this other broken thing in their life. Therefore, nothing should be taken seriously. And so manipulative people, listen now, will use your transparency and your vulnerability against you. And so it's another way of just bearing a false witness, putting yourself out there as so transparent when you're actually just fairly insecure. And so what I did is I went back and I said, okay, let's go back to Jesus. And I looked at how Jesus handled vulnerability and transparency, and here's what I found. Jesus was super wise and super discerning. So let me give you a couple examples. Jesus was asked like 30 questions in the gospel. He answered 3 of them. Half the times he walked away, he didn't answer. Somebody just tell him, say, you're not answering my question, I'm not going to answer your question. You're not a safe person. You're going to try to manipulate my answer. I understand that, so I'm not playing this game. It actually says of Jesus, it said, he did not entrust himself to man because he knew the heart of man and he knew that it was evil. He would say to his disciples, hey, just did this miracle, just taught you this thing. You're going to tell people, don't tell them yet. Because if they got that information now, they'd manipulate it, they'd misuse it, and it's not time for that yet. And so he would tell them, play it low. In fact, Jesus ultimately does become crazy vulnerable, crazy transparent, but only with his proven, trusted friends over years. And so he assumed that in order to have relationships, you had to have trust, you had to have truth, and you had to see that happen. And so you build those relationships. And so whether you're the person who will manipulate the truth, or you just feel kind of you've been hurt by the Jews, you put yourself out there and you got kicked around and stepped on, so now you're isolating. Both of those will lead to you being alone, lead to you being isolated, leading to you not going to people. It's stunningly unhealthy, it's stunningly broken. And so both of those are extreme. A person who doesn't bear false witness is a person who enters into emotionally healthy relationships, mutually giving and taking with appropriate levels of transparency based on the nature of the relationship. You shouldn't be telling a coworker at work who's a casual friend the same thing you're telling your spouse. In fact, that's the pathway for things getting really messed up sometimes. And so when you understand these things, it understands how this shapes a worldview in the most wonderful, powerful way. Look at how Jesus handled this in Matthew chapter 5, where he warns against manipulation of the truth. Look what he says. He falls back into that pattern. Again, you have heard that it was said. And so Jesus, 6 times in the Sermon on the Mount, follows this pattern, where he's trying to get them to recognize that the thing they think they know, they don't know. The thing they think is clear is not clear. And so he says, you have heard it said, but I say. And he's moving from cold stone, old rule, to new principle of the heart. And so Jesus comes and he says, you have heard it said, that it said of old, you shall not swear falsely. So this is a reference to that command. You are not supposed to give false witness. You're not supposed to swear. So this is a combination of this one and another verse where the arm was raised and said, okay, the Old Testament says you have to have the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, and you swear that what you're about to say about the person is true. We do this in the court of law today. He said, you've heard that when you do that, you're not supposed to do that falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what the Lord sworn. And so this became like this hard, fast rule, and people would find ways to just follow this. And what they ended up doing is they started creating an elaborate system, this is during the time of Jesus, of loopholes, where, all right, you can't swear falsely, but what do we say if we create different levels of oaths? So if you do the really highest oath, absolutely, you got to follow it. But if you do one of the lesser oaths, then it's not as big. And so that's what the second part is about. But I say to you, Jesus said, do not take oaths at all. Now, some people read that and say, well, we shouldn't swear in court, we shouldn't do the Pledge of Allegiance. That is an adventure in missing the point. What Jesus is saying here when he says don't take an oath like that is he's saying don't play those games. Don't fall on the manipulation train. Don't find ways to try to convince people of something that is not true. He says this. He says, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. These in the time of Jesus were different levels of oaths. Because if you swore to God, that was a big deal. If you swore to the temple, that was not as big. You could have some wiggle room. If you just swore on like your own head or something like that, there were levels. And it's complicated and messy. And notice how this doesn't clarify anything. Can I trust you or not? What kind of oath did you do? This is game playing. This is, I said it, but I had my fingers crossed. You know what we do when we swear? Swear is we're trying to convince someone who the relationship is not strong enough that they trust us. So we say, I will do it. Really? Yes, I swear. I swear to God. I swear to my mother's grave. Never really like my mom, but you don't know that. I love Mom. Mom, I love you. It's all good. She listens. Anyway, the point is we swear on Mom. Swear on Mom's grave. Swear on she's alive. Doesn't matter. When she gets a grave, I swear on it. All these different kinds of things. And then we say, you know what, I'm going to swear on the Bible. You know what I'm going to do? You know what I'm going to do, right? What am I going to do? I'm going to swear on a stack of Bibles. Come on now. This is me doubling down to try to say, no, really, you can trust me when you don't. And it's manipulation, it's pressure. And Jesus said, just don't mess with that. He says, don't take oaths by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, or the footstool, or anything. He says, just don't do that. He goes on to say, and do not take oaths on your head, even on the things you control, because you think you can control, because you can't. For you cannot even make one hair black or white, or even hair grow. It's a thing. You can't do it. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Yes or no. You're going to do it? Yeah, I'm going to do it. Simple clarity. No, I'm not going to do it. And there's so much wisdom in this, because not only is it just simply listen, without equivocation, without manipulation. If I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. If I say I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there. Unless there's some crazy reason that comes up, I'm going to keep the commitment that I am the kind of person you can trust. I am a safe person who's going to tell you the truth. I'm a safe person who you can trust. And I'm not going to play these manipulation games to try to get you to what I'm doing. Notice he also says that it's okay to say yes and no. Because some people over here, they just feel like, a manipulative person will come in their life and say, will you help me? Yeah, it's not a good time. Oh, please. Yeah, it's not good. Oh, I thought you were a good Christian. All right, I'll do it. And so they feel like they don't have power to say no. And half of life is figuring out what to say yes and no to. And the truth is, most of the things you get asked to do should be a no. Because most of us are trying to figure out what we should do, which is the absolute best. And when we do too many good things, we never get to the best thing. And so in this is just riddled with wisdom. And he says, so don't play the games of oath-taking. Don't play the game of manipulation. Don't play the game of trying to manipulate the narrative. He says this, and then because he doubles down, he says, anything more than just the simple transparency of yes and no comes from evil. And literally in the Greek, the word there is evil or the evil one. And so what he's basically saying here is that the language of taking, The language of manipulation, the language of using language to control people, that's the devil's territory. That's Satan's territory. I mean, think about it. In the original story of the man and the woman in the garden, the serpent shows up and he's acting like a friend. He says, I am so here to help you, girlfriend. I don't think he said that. I didn't think that joke would work. I apologize to my children. All right, so he says, I'm here and I'm giving you enlightenment. And so much understanding, you're welcome. And then he starts talking, and here's the thing. If you go back and you look closely at the passage, he doesn't tell any lies. He uses a bunch of truth to tell a false narrative, to get her to completely misunderstand, to get the told story misunderstood. And so when we play those games, we are making ourselves. Jesus said this about the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. He said, you quote the scriptures. You quote the Bible all the time. When the devil tempted Jesus in the scriptures, in the Bible, he quoted scripture. And so he used true things to manipulate. And so when you're doing that kind of thing, maybe you're aware of it and you're just a horrible, wicked person. And if you're an evil person. You should stop doing those things. Or maybe you're just a person, no, you're not even mature enough to be aware that's how you play the game. But if you are in the devil. Jesus said to the Pharisees of the law, he said, you are children of the devil. You are doing the devil's work, and relationships are not possible. You are not safe. You are not a safe person to have a relationship. And if you're on the other side, where you don't learn through emotional intelligence, through proper boundaries, through having a sense of yourself and your security and your good shepherd, that you don't let people to do that, well, then you are facilitating unhealthy relationships. And so when you see how this is so central to healthy interaction with people. And so Jesus comes back and he says, I want to turn the whole thing on its head. And so this is what we need to do this week. We need to take a deep look inside. We need to start by saying, Jesus, am I just committed to the fact that you're my shepherd and you're going to provide for me so I don't need to claw or clutch or manipulate or try to get. You see me so I don't need everybody else to see me. You love me so I don't need to earn anybody else's love. And the more I believe that, the more it frees me from having to take and be a taker, being a taker, and being a taker. I can start entering relationships where I learn to give and to receive. To give and to receive. I can learn the joy of being generous and the joy of letting someone else bless my life. I can learn the humility of being a person in need who someone helps. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And when you enter those kinds of relationships, they are mutual, they are life-giving, and then it becomes a competition who can give to each other. It's beautiful. And then you got to take a look and say, am I radically committed to being an honest person? In my words, am I representing what is really true? Whether or not I'm a person who tends to manipulate the truth to get what I want, or whether I be the kind of person who puts up with that nonsense. That as I look in my relationships, there are all these broken, dysfunctional things that no one will talk about, and I haven't learned how to talk about them. And so often people who are not good at this, and none of us are good at this, will say, well, I didn't want to cause any problems. Well, there's a problem already, so you're not at it, you're not doing anything. Well, you don't understand, I don't want to hurt anybody. Actually, the person you want to get hurt is you. And if you could learn how to do this, you could bring healing to the environment. Okay? And so what am I supposed to do? You're supposed to read a book on boundaries. You're supposed to come to emotionally healthy relationships. You're supposed to come to emotionally healthy discipleship. You're supposed to go through trauma reboot so you understand how your family, you maybe grew up in an environment where you had to lie to survive. And so you learn how to undo that. This is emotional intelligence. This is maturity. This is the wisdom of God pushed into the deepest recesses of your life to bring life and health and peace. And when you start practicing this and you stumble and you learn to do this, and you start becoming that person, you become an amazing person. You become a wise person, a good person, a powerful person who brings good into the world. And meaning and healing comes in the most remarkable ways. This week, I want you to do some things. I want you to take seriously the Apostle Paul's admonition. He says, therefore, putting away all falsehood. Just pay attention. Am I being honest with myself, with others, with God? Let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor. Look at this. For we are all members of one another. So learn how to speak the truth. Now, we got to learn how to speak the truth in love. We got to learn to have the kind of friends that if you're not in a good place, they're going to come to you and say, I'm worried about you. Or what's going on with this? Or you seem really angry. You seem really afraid. Or you're just not yourself. Talk to me about what's going on. You say, it's nothing. Nah, it is something. And then those friends, it becomes beautiful. Why do you need to do this? Well, because we're members of one another. Because you cannot lie to others without lying to yourself. You cannot take from others without taking from yourself. You cannot degrade the humanities of others without degrading yourself. You cannot live in isolation. In isolation because you've been on either one of these extremes. It's time to come back into the light and to live a way that is whole and healthy and healing in the most profound ways. And so this week we're going to go ahead, we're going to grab the devotions on our way out. We're going to spend some time and we're going to pay attention to our relationships, asking two fundamental questions. One, am I a safe person? Can I enter in relationships in such a way that I am not taking and I'm not being dishonest? Say, well, I tell the truth. Yeah, but are you honest? Because those are two different things. And the second question you can ask, am I a safe person? Second question, are my relationships in my life safe? Or have I been surrounding myself with unhealthy relationships or have been burned so many times in unhealthy relationships, I'm just kind of isolated and all alone? Well, then it's time to just let God speak into that, step into that, maybe start making plans for this fall that I'm going to do those classes they talk about, because it really looks like they're applying the teachings of Jesus to like our relationships and our emotional and mental health in a deep and profound way. And so we'll do this journey together. Let's pray. Father, I thank you. I thank you. You're the God of truth. You're the God of love. You're the God of honesty. You're the God of reality. And we want to live in reality because we know what we'll find there is a God who knows us and loves us, helps us with hard things, gives us courage to love one another in deep and profound ways. I pray, Father God, that these two commandments would not just be on cold stone, but they'd move to our heart, that we'd be people who learn to give and take in healthy relationships, that we'd be people who would learn to value honesty in the deepest way to ourselves, to you, to each other. Pray that you'd give us good, healthy relationships, that we could live safely in these principles. We thank you for the healing you're doing, the truth of your word, and for Jesus who set the bar for all of this. For it's in his name we pray. Amen.